Everyone, my name is Mohammed, and in this video I'm going to go through 3 players that you should sell and 3 players that you should keep and give another chance. My rationale for keeping or selling these players will be based on these factors: their form, their upcoming fixtures, and whether there are better alternate options that you should go for. The players I'll go through are basically 50-50 picks at the moment when it comes to these decisions. So I won't mention players like Haaland, Mitoma, or Madison, or etc. who are obvious keeps in your team. And also on the other end of the spectrum, I won't talk about players like Richarlison or Eze who have given enough reasons so far to suggest that they should 100% not be in your team, whether that's due to injury or extremely bad form. My aim will be to look at the 50-50 choices in your team and try to dissect their pros and cons and hopefully come to a conclusion on whether you should sell them or keep them. I'll start with Ben Chilwell. So Chelsea have not looked very convincing. One good performance was their game against Luton. However, it was against Luton, who are at the bottom of the league and looking way out of their depth in the Premier League. Chilwell's XGA numbers are not the best, they're okay. Chelsea still have a very good run of fixtures. They've got Bournemouth away next, then Aston Villa at home, and then Fulham away, and then Burnley away. But I think the most important factor here when deciding on Chilwell is that there are not a lot of options in defense that can replace him. If you don't have what are probably considered the essentials at this moment, so Estupinan or Udogie or another Tottenham defender like Romero or Pedro Porro, then you'll possibly waste the transfer which can be used to upgrade your team elsewhere. And you'll end up with a player who will likely get you the same or similar amount of points, given that clean sheets have become unpredictable these days. They're sort of a thing of the past these years in FPL. Ever since COVID, I feel like clean sheets have just become very, very rare. Trent Alexander-Arnold seems to be becoming a good option, but I would wait and analyze before spending 8 million on a defender. I think we need more from him before we can do that. My conclusion on Ben Chilwell is you keep him. Next is Ollie Watkins. Very expensive at 8 million. He's not in good form. He doesn't seem to be blending in well with his players. He's on a different wavelength and he's not scoring enough points to justify his worth at 8 million. Fixtures are what you might call medium in the next 4. We've got Crystal Palace at home, then Chelsea away. We've got Brighton at home and then Wolves away. Options to replace Watkins are plenty. You've got Alvarez, who seems to be essential at this point given that KDB is not back anytime soon. And normally based on last season, that means that Alvarez plays more. Rotation options are not many for Alvarez, and he's also in very, very good form. That being said though, there is the caveat that he plays for Man City and he's under Pep, and there's always the fear of Pep Roulette, which I think everyone who plays FPL knows about. Another option for replacing him is Wissa. While he didn't score in his last 2 matches, Brentford are a good team, and you can see their next fixture versus Newcastle being a high-scoring one. Archer is another good enabling option. He starts at Sheffield United, he costs only 4.6 million and gets you lots of funds to be able to change your formation from 3-4-3 to 3-5-2. So you can take advantage of the multiple great options in midfield. My conclusion on Ollie Watkins is sell. Next is Joao Pedro. He blanked in his last game and he was taken off at minute 74. Was benched in the last 2 games. In the next 2 games, sorry. In the 2 games before the last one he was benched. He scored once in his first game, but at this point I think he's an unsure asset. He plays for Brighton, which means that he's a rotation risk with De Zerbi at the helm. There are many options in the front. They've got Enciso, they've got Ferguson, they've got Mitoma, they've got March. They also recently got Ansu Fati from Barcelona, so they've got a lot of options in the front line, which means that he is more of a rotation risk now than ever. You could replace Joao Pedro with one of the attacking options that I mentioned earlier. So either upgrade him to Alvarez, which I think is the best option based on his form, or you downgrade him to an enabler like Archer. Conclusion obviously with Joao Pedro is sell, get him out of there. Next is Marcus Rashford. So bad start to the season. He's a bit tricky, Marcus Rashford. He's not as easy as some of the other choices over here. He's had a bad start to the season with 2 blanks. It's far away from the form that he was in last season before his injury. He was pretty much essential at that point. I remember, like, first half of last season, he was on fire. You could not have him in your team. Man United have not had a good start to the season either. They looked bad against Wolves in their first game and were lucky to get away with a 1-0 win then. Then they lost 2-0 against Tottenham. And then they won 3-2 against Nottingham Forest, but they made a big meal out of what should have been a straightforward win. Afterwards, they lost 2-1 against Arsenal in what was a thrilling game. Even based on the above though, I haven't made my full judgment on the team yet. It's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. They've lost 2 of their 4 matches, but both were against big teams. There's no real shame in losing against Spurs or Arsenal, even if they didn't look as really good in those games. Rashford got 2 assists against Nottingham Forest, and he got a goal against Arsenal, meaning he's starting to pick up some form. They have Brighton at home next, and that could be kind of an indicator of where Man United are at the moment. They lost against them last season in this exact same fixture. It could be a bounce back for United, or it could not be. But the point I want to make is I'd want a bigger testing sample before getting rid of a player who seems to be gaining his form based on the last 2 fixtures, and he's playing for a team whose form is 50-50 at the moment with good fixtures coming up. They've got Brighton at home, they've got Burnley away, they've got Crystal Palace at home afterwards, then Brentford at home, then Sheffield United away. So my conclusion on Rashford is to keep him. Next is, I think, the trickiest one on this video. It's Mo Salah. Based purely on his history, we all know the history with Salah. Those who have played this game in past seasons know how much of an essential he was at that point. But if we were to keep that out of the equation and only look at this season, he doesn't seem to look like the best Liverpool asset to have. He's very expensive and without the numbers to justify his price tag. So I think he's 12.5 million. If you're insistent on Liverpool, you might as well go for one of the others like Gakpo, Nunez, or Luis Diaz. But the problem would be rotation. They seem to be finding form based on their very convincing game against Aston Villa last week, where they looked surprisingly like their defense looked a bit stable. Since the beginning of the season and since last season as well, their defense seemed to be rock solid. Van Dijk was suspended for that game, so could the absence of him be leading to this good form in defense? We'll have to see. But for now, there are multiple options in midfield which you can use to replace Salah with, and this will free up funds for you to use elsewhere in your team if needed. So for midfield, you've got Maddison, you've got Sterling, you've got Mbeumo, you've got Mitoma, you've got Son. Forwards, obviously, you've got Alvarez, if you want to reshuffle your team, change your formation. If you're insistent on Liverpool, Alexander-Arnold might be a good option given that he looked great versus Aston Villa and because their defense seemed to be more solid in that game. Though, as I said earlier, it's still too hard to judge at this point. My conclusion on Salah is kind of 50-50, but I'm leaning more towards sell. At this point, I just see that there are a lot of options over there, especially if you're wildcarding, you're looking to reshape your whole team. I would get rid of Salah at that point, and I would use those funds for all the multiple options that are there in midfield. And next is Yohan Wissa. He's not scored or returned in the last 2 games, which were supposed to be easy on paper. So they had Crystal Palace and they had Bournemouth in the last 2 games, which were supposed to be easy games for him. He was supposed to haul in those, but he didn't. He started off fantastic in the first 2 games though, versus Tottenham and Fulham. He still has great underlying statistics, and if you value XG, he's one of the top performers out of the forward options. His next fixture is against Newcastle. On paper, that's hard, but it could easily be a high-scoring game in which he could feature. Newcastle haven't looked that good this season. They're not as good as they were last season. They've had some tricky run since the start of this season. Wissa isn't someone who I would see as a red flag yet. So I wouldn't be so hasty in trying to get rid of him, especially if you have other fires in your team that you wanna, you wanna put out first. I would easily think of keeping Wissa. His upcoming fixtures are also very tasty. So after Newcastle away, they've got Everton at home, which seems to be a super easy fixture if you look at their results lately. Yeah, afterwards, they've got Nottingham Forest away, they've got Man United away, and then they've got Burnley at home. So while Alvarez does seem to be an upgrade on him at this point due to his form, I would hold for now, especially if there are other fires in your team that you want to put out first. My conclusion on Wissa is you keep him.